Hello everybody, I'm going to show LLBLGen, the features it has, and walk you through a couple of project creation and database activities. And after that we will show how to use the generated code and the framework to create a report using DevExpress reporting technology. And my co-host will be Seth Juarez, who will be helping me with building the reports.
That was cool, man. You said my name like you were from Mexico or something. You
Juarez.
are Studley. Juarez. I thought I was in Mexico. That was beautiful. Good job, dude.
Okay, man. So first of all, I will describe some rather boring, perhaps, stuff. It's theory. And it's about what is object relational mapping. This picture is from the documentation, and it's describing the relationship between abstract entity model, the code elements like class files, and database schema elements like table definitions and view definitions. When you see a table in a database or a class in your project, it actually has a reason to be there. So what's the reason that is there? It's a projection from the abstract entity model, like an entity, a customer entity or an order entity. Because we create projections to both sides, we can create mappings between them. So an instance of one element of both sides can move between them and have the same meaning. Like when I have a customer table and a customer class, I can define a mapping between them and create an instance in the table or an object here and save it here, or create a row in the customer table and read it in a customer class instance and customer object. I can then manipulate either, so I can change the other side. So when I have a customer row in the database, I read it into a customer class instance, change a couple of fields, and persist it back. That's the basic theory behind object relational mapping. Some people just look at the code elements and say, well, I have a bunch of classes and I want to persist it in the database. But actually, the classes they have are not falling from the sky. They have a reason to be there. They are a projection from the abstract entity model. It doesn't have to be that it's a one-to-one mapping. For example, if you have a customer class, it can have a base class person that isn't mapped to a table, for example. And the same goes this way. Like you have three tables, and those are mapped as one entity or in a inheritance hierarchy, for example. I will now show two different ways to create the abstract entity model. One is model first, so we start from scratch and we create an abstract entity model, and the other one is database first, where we start from an existing database and reverse engineer it to an entity model. We do that with LLBLGen Pro. This is the designer, and it's empty as we start up. On the left, we will see the Project Explorer, where we will have the entity model and the entities and all the other elements. On the right, we have the Catalog Explorer that will be hosting the relational model data, like catalogs, tables, views, and foreign key constraints, for example. And visually, we'll create a bridge between them using the designer. I'll first run through the preference a little bit, because this will drive our project, and it's easier if we first configure a couple of things here. It's a little bit overwhelming, perhaps, in the first. At first, there's all kinds of settings for elements, and a new project will inherit most of these settings. I'll now create a model first project, and I'll call it customer ordering.
So let me ask you a question, Franz.
Yeah.
So model first, can you describe what that means? So what do you mean by model first?
I have a picture of that too.
Oh, cool.
So this is database first. I have a database schema elements like tables, views, foreign key constraints, all that kind of stuff. And I reverse engineer both of two elements, namely the abstract entity model, that's just a model without mappings, and the mappings itself. And I use both with code generation to create code elements, which can be classes, mapping files, and that kind of stuff.
So what's the difference between the abstract entity model and the mappings?
Abstract entity model will be like a customer entity definition, the fields it has, the types of the fields, the relationships between the entities. And the mappings will be like you have a customer entity and it's mapped on a customer table. So the mapping between the fields is defined in the mappings.
Interesting.
We will see that during the couple of minutes.
Perfect.
Model first. We start with an abstract entity model and we forward engineer this to database schema elements and mappings. And use code generation to create code elements.
So you're saying you don't have to have a database before you do the model first?
No. I will walk you through a complete from scratch model to database schema.
Perfect.
So I create a new project. I call it customer ordering. It's a very basic model, just 4 or 5 entities in a couple of fields. When I create it, it pops up the project properties. Most of the values in here are inherited from the preferences I've shown a couple of minutes ago. Like the navigator patterns, what the format of the what the format is of them when they are auto created. The second tab has the settings for the framework I'm using. Currently, I'm using LLBLGen Pro Runtime Framework. Every framework we support has different settings. These are specified in an XML file, so I can add new settings to those XML files, and I will see it in this grid.
So let me ask a question. So the first settings have to do with the project. The second have to do with how you can output stuff from your program. What do you mean by frameworks? What kind of frameworks can this program output to?
LLBLGen Pro Runtime Framework, obviously, Entity Framework version 1, version 4, and Hibernate and Link to SQL.
Interesting.
So,
cool.
And it's actually pretty easy to add your own ORM framework to the designer.
That sounds like a really good idea.
Yeah, perhaps for XPO or something.
Perhaps. Yeah.
I will briefly go through the other tabs. Abbreviations is used in reverse database first, reverse engineering. So, for example, when you have a database with abbreviations like QTY for quantity, for example, it can automatically expand those snippets to real words. Custom properties are name-value pairs you can use for code generation, mainly for documentation. And the project also has code generation metadata defaults. The system has a way to define attributes on all kinds of elements, define additional namespaces, additional interfaces for elements. For example, when I go to the navigate a single value, that's, for example, the customer field on an order entity, I can specify an attribute for every instance of those elements, and it will automatically be generated into generated code. Every element of that type inherits the attribute defined here, and I can override it for every element in its editor. I will now just press OK. I'll close this one. I will show now the tools for using model first, and I will do that with the way a person will interview a domain expert. So the person is not a programmer, it's not a model engineer, but it's a person who visits clients and has the interviews with a domain expert. And it's a very easy tool to use. It's called Quick Model, and Quick Model can be used to quickly model an entity model for you. So by simply typing facts, and the editor is clever enough to check whether an element is there, and if it's there, it won't create it. But if it's not there, it will create it. So I'll just type in some facts like. So now I have defined two entities and a relationship.
Wait. What did you just do? That was really fast.
I typed one sentence, this one, and I defined two entities, a relationship with a one-to-many relationship, and two navigators mapped on that relationship.
Interesting. And so it knew to create two entities and the relationship.
Yeah.
That's pretty clever, man.
So I will now type 4 other relationships and at the same time define the entities that are involved.
Holy cow, how do you put fields in there?
We'll see that in a second.
Okay.
So I have 4 entities defined. I made a typo. All right. I have 4 entities defined and a couple of relationships. I will now go deeper into the model by simply changing the scope. I will now type away. So it will. So the guy is interviewing another person, but he is not a programmer, so he doesn't know what a primary key is or anything. But he will now, after this, will give the same model to the developer, so the developer can take off with this model without making any conversion or have to write a Word document, for example. So.
So how did you come up with this particular way of doing it?
Well, during interviews with stakeholders and domain experts, you always have to write things down, but you cannot do that in a way that the domain expert can possibly probably understand it, because it's always too technical. So, and at the same time, you want the developer to take over the same model, because otherwise you have to tell him what to create, like. Oh, it has to have an order entity. What kinds of fields does the order entity have? So this image that is created is also easy to explain to the domain expert, because you can say, well, here's an order line, it has a one-to-many relationship. That's often easy to understand. So the hash u is a scope definition. So I will now go into the order line scope and define some fields there. I can also directly jump to another scope with by specifying colon. I'll Okay, so I now have the fields defined. I haven't defined any primary key field or anything, because the developer, the guy interviewing, doesn't know what it is. So at this moment, I will create a model view from this.
Is it wiggling the way you don't like it to?
It's a nice library, but it's okay. Now it's, I think. All right.
So what's the difference between the quick model and the initial model?
This model is now fixed in the project.
Okay.
The quick model is just a quick overview of what I'm currently doing.
Okay.
So when I want to clear this, for example, I've cleared it. But when I type customer again, to go to scope higher, it's there again, and it's already in the project. So it didn't create it again.
Oh, I see.
I can now type initial some documentation like so the guy who has interviewed the domain expert can write things down here for the developer, for example.
I see.
And the developer will now take over. The developer will now define some primary key fields. So you first okay. And you automatically see that it will create a foreign key field on the other side.
Oh, interesting. So what does the IDIntStar? What does a star mean? Does that mean
Star means that it's for a primary key field.
Okay.
Orders. So now I have defined all primary key fields. And I can also define some other fields like for supplier and zip code, for example. I didn't specify a type for a zip code here, so it will have no type defined by default.
Wow.
I will show how to fix that later. I'll go to supplier in the editor. And I'll see it doesn't have a type defined here, so I can simply start typing. It will select a string for me. This is also a DevExpress grip, by the way.
Oh, really? Look at that go. I was wondering why it was so good looking. I just was attracted to it immediately.
It's shiny, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I have a bunch of entities here, a bunch of fields, relationships, and the developer thinks, okay, this is good enough. I will create a database from this. So I will add a relational model data storage for a database. And
wait, you can export it to any kind of, what kind of databases can you export to?
To Firebird, these guys. Except MS Access is a little difficult because it doesn't have DDL SQL script support.
So how did you fix that?
No, we current you cannot create a new Access database with model first.
I see.
In general, not really a problem. Now I have an empty relational model store here for SQL Server. And if I press this guy, it will automatically create my entities, the fields, the types, and create sequence definitions. Like I've now. This isn't in the database yet. It's still in the project only. As you can see, there aren't any fields marked as primary key nor any foreign key constraints defined yet. That's because I have to validate the model first. It has two validation options. First is the validation for just the model, and the second is the validation, and will also adjust the schema with the changes you've made here.
So what is the model validation? What is it solving? What is it doing?
It will simply say, well, do you have a primary key defined? Do you have types specified for every field? That kind of stuff. So it first has to make sure the model is valid, and then it can create the relational model data from the model. So I will now press this guy. It will validate this model. It will automatically see which things aren't defined here, and it will auto-create those, like the foreign key constraint, for example, for every relationship I defined. You also see that the order of this is alphabetically. I could have set in the project properties a setting where I have the ordering automatically in the order in which I specified the fields. For example, I can set the field order here and move it up, down, for example. And when I create new tables from that, it will automatically follow the ordering I specified here instead of use alphabetically ordering. For now, I will keep this. I will now export this schema I created to a script, and I will run it on a database to create a real database.
So is this DDL schema compatible with the provider that you're targeting? It must be, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So if I also add an Oracle relational model data, I can automatically map to Oracle as well in the same project, and it will then export DDL SQL that's compatible with Oracle. So I have now created a create script. So when I go to my SQL Server Management Studio, I can open a file. I'll open this one. And this is the script I just created from the project. It simply defines my tables, the foreign key constraints. So when I run this, oh, okay. I have my database here.
So here's a question. How did you make it so that it could target so many different databases? Because obviously you're not going to write new code for each. You're not going to have to recompile your tool for each new database provider. How did you make it do that?
Well, LLBLGen obviously has a code generator, so I wrote a couple of templates for this. So when I select this target framework, this is the template editor that's embedded in the designer, and this is simply the root template that is running for this single script. And then I include for every database simply a template that's bound to this ID, And when you look at the SQL Server specific mappings, you see a template ID here, like when I go set active catalog include. Set active catalog include. It's simple, this snippet. So it will be included at generation time at this spot. And when it is, that's the same for this ID, for this ID. And at the end, like for example, the create for key constraint, for example, that's longer. So at runtime,
so you're really just writing code. Say you wanted to make say you came up with food database. You can literally create your own templates and target the food database using your tool.
Yes.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. I can now switch to, and here's the script. For example, this is simply the snippet you see here. So it when you look at the when you look at this, you see that it sets a parameter to the active catalog name, and the script will simply, well, because it's included at this spot, it's simply in scope, so it will simply emit the variable name at this spot. Like, what's this? Oh shit! Oh, I didn't. Yeah. Sorry, I have to kill a process now.
Oh, no problem. So it automatically backs up everything too? Holy cow.
It's automatically backup that's run. Okay. Am I live now again? Okay. I have a database now with my tables and my primary keys, and my order has a foreign key constraint. I think keys, yes. So I can now generate code and target this database and fill it with data and retrieve it and modify it. After a while, close this one. After a while, a change has to be made. For some odd reason, this relationship has to be a one-to-one. So I will edit this relationship. I'll add it. I will change it to a one-to-one relationship, and the change will be more significant than just a reference parameter that has to change. Because it's a one-to-one relationship, a unique constraint has to be placed on this field in the database. So when I press validation and modify again, it has automatically created my unique constraint here. And I can now export this change as a new script to modify my database. So I can create an update script. Which is very simple. There's nothing to do here, so it just skips it. And here I have my alter table statement that will add a unique constraint. And when I run this, it automatically has altered. Where is it? Oh, it's a key here. Added the unique constraint to this table. So I can have from model first to the schema all the way from LLBLGen without having to modify tables directly in the database itself. And when I go back to my image from the, I define my model here and project it onto the database schema. And I make a change here and I project it again here. So there's always a theoretical base for why elements are in the database the way they are. Namely, they are defined here in the abstract entity model. And because it's a model, I can always easily change it, communicate with my domain expert, for example, through an image like this initial model image I have saved here, and ask him or her if it's still valid or if they need changes more, and I can directly make a change, update the relational model data in the Catalog Explorer and export the data again. This is the short introduction for model first. I will now do the database first, and I will use AdventureWorks for that. I'll create a new project. And I will specify abbreviation for QTY because the schema contains several of these elements. Now, to reverse engineer an entity model from a database, I first have to retrieve it. So I will point LLBLGen to the AdventureWorks database by using a wizard. This is the DevExpress wizard.
No wonder. I was wondering why. I was like, that wizard is so beautiful. Now I know.
DevExpress code. So I will connect to my database. And I can now browse the schema elements that I want to import. So I will just say I will import everything. The next step will be to say which store procedures have a result set. Because it's an expensive operation and this is optional. And I will just say these guys have a result set. It now has retrieved AdventureWorks from the database in relational.
So what do you mean by result sets from the stored procedures?
Well, some like this, for example. Where is it? Here. It has a result set, and because it has a result set, which has a layout. So when I check that checkbox, it will check the layout of the result set. And it can only do that with executing the store procedure with bogus parameters, so it won't return any data inside the transactions which will be rolled back. So it will get the result set layout. If I check the details, it will has the fields and the types and the order of the fields. And I can map a type view on this, which is a read-only object. Instead of just calling the store procedure and get an untyped result set back. So I can use this information to map elements on it. In the current version, I cannot map an entity to this. In the next version 3.2, which will be released later this year, we will map entities onto result sets as well. I will now reverse engineer entities from this database, and I will get an overview of all the entities that are available, and it also has placed them into groups already, because I have a setting switched on that I want the schema name used as a group name in my model as well. I'll simply check all checkboxes except these and press add to project. I now have a model created, reverse engineered from the AdventureWorks, and every entity is placed in a group that's corresponding to the schema where the corresponding table is in. For example, if I edit address, I go to the mappings tab, I see it's mapped onto person address. Visit here, it's the person schema. When I do full validation, it says, oh, it's okay. You see a couple of warnings here, which says that a couple of elements in the project aren't used in my model yet. I can ignore the warnings. I can also auto specify what to do with it. For example, when you over time have a lot of tables or a couple of tables in your schema that aren't used anymore, you want to know which tables those are, so you can remove them. And this can be automatic. So if I say, for example, mark for deletion, okay, and say validate, it won't show the warning, but it will automatically remove my store procedure. So I won't do that. I have them back. I will now show another feature that's called automatically inheritance hierarchy discovery. Like when you have entities, you can also have inheritance with entities. For example, AdventureWorks has inheritance inside the schema. A customer is a root type for individual. So when I say construct target entity hierarchies, it automatically finds those hierarchies and construct them. So it will now automatically have customer as root type for individual and store. And store automatically has the fields of customer inherited next to its own fields. I specified an abbreviation, QTY, to quantity. And what if I want to know which fields have that abbreviation? I can use the element search. Element search is very powerful in LLBLGen because you can specify any link query over the model and it will give you the results. So when I, for example, want entities, I can specify any link query here. So copy paste a prefab query. So when I run this, it will give me all the entities that has a field with the name quantity. So when I go to bill of material in the group production, it has a field with quantity in the name. And when I edit this and go to field mappings, I indeed see that the field in the data in the database is called QTY at the end, and quantity is here changed through the abbreviation I specified. Okay. I revalidate, everything's okay. I will now generate code. Generate source code. And this is the source code that will be used in a project, in a Visual Studio project. So I'll simply specify this path, and I can now press this button to generate code. I will briefly walk through the other tabs here. These are the template bindings that will bind a template file to a template ID, which we saw previously in the SQL generator templates. And this is the task queue that will be executed during code generation. I can add new tasks to this queue. For example, I've created a class that will automatically check out code from source control or compile it at the end. I can add a task like that to this queue and save it as a preset, and I run it the next time. I will simply accept this default and I will generate code.
What kinds of templates can you write on top of this? Because it looks like you're actually going to be able to do some extra code based on the entities. Is that right?
Yes, you can write any template you want. You can generate XML, text, whatever.
Or like a DTO helper or something like that?
Yeah, that's no problem. It's simply any template that can output something in text format. You can use that. For example, when I go to the, for example, the app config is the XML. It's an XML file, but this is a C# file. This uses a simple DSL for code generation, which is pattern based, and you also have the other ASP using template engine, which we saw with the database script templates.
So this looks like you're writing like an ASP.NET page, but for code that's going to be output per entity. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you put like the Razor View engine in there? Because then everyone would totally pee themselves.
How would you want to do that?
I don't know. I just think it's cool that, well, in essence, what you're saying is that you can generate your own custom code based upon the entities that are in there.
Yeah.
And you can do this several times. So you can target. Are you telling me that you can have tasks that run on entities more than once?
Yes.
Interesting.
I can also, and I can access any object in the project. I'll now open a plugin. LLBLGen also support plugins, which are easily created using .NET, where you can just inherit from a base class and fill in a couple of blanks, and then you get a call when that plugin is run. You can say, well, I run my plugin only runs on entities or only on a whole project. And this is a viewer, which is a simple viewer for how the project model looks like internally, and I can examine this to see how the object model looks in memory, so I can write my template easily because I know which objects to target. There's also a reference manual, but it's easier if you see it live, for example. I will now do briefly a feature tour of the different features I didn't describe yet. The error catalog you see here. It has different choices. You can have choices or you can have tasks, and the error code that's detecting it can inject these. And for example, if I go to an entity like address, I'll change this type into a string and I do validate, I'll get an error because the field is mapped on a date field. So when I go to the error list, I see that I have one choice: go there and fix it. So when the error, the validation code knows how to fix it, you get an option to click it and it can fix it for you. Otherwise, you have to fix it manually. So this is an error you have to fix manually. So if I close this one and click go there, it will open the entity in editor, and I will read the error. Oh, I have to fix it to date. When I validate it again, it's only warnings now. Search, I've talked about it briefly. Template editor I've shown. I will now show again a thing called multi-database. My project initially has SQL Server, and my domain expert I talked about earlier wants to use Oracle for some reason, so we have to add Oracle support as well. So we first add a new data storage for a database, which is Oracle, but at the moment it's empty. So I have to add it. I have to tell LLBLGen to use these entities again to create a model first process and create the table definitions in Oracle. However, I first have to do something else, which is define a type conversion definition, because my field here, discontinued, is a Boolean field, and Oracle doesn't support Booleans. So I have to specify a type definition for a database type, which is, for example, integer 16, and I will auto create. Close this. My DBA on Oracle is also a real DBA, so he demands that all characters are uppercase and use underscores at word breaks. So I can tell LLBLGen to do that. For example, all uppercase and insert an underscore at word breaks. And I have to check another setting, namely auto assign type converters. When I now press this one again, it generates my tables. It generates in uppercase and underscores on word breaks. And it also generated sequences, because I have a setting enabled automatically that I want all primary keys of type integer to be sequenced. Oracle uses sequences instead of auto number settings in like in SQL Server. I don't have primary keys yet because I have to validate again. Everything is okay, and I now have primary keys and the foreign keys defined. I can now export a create script. Yes. When I go to the create script again. This is for Oracle now. It of course doesn't run on SQL Server, but you can see that the script is totally different. It uses Oracle types, quotes around names, creates a sequence. And when I now run this on Oracle database, it creates my tables on the Oracle database instead of SQL Server, and I can automatically use it after I regenerate the database specific code for Oracle. A new feature in 3.1 is import. Import means that I can import entity definitions from an existing project file, and I can also import mappings and schema definition. Now the advancement of this is that after a while you recognize that you have to recreate common things like order, customer, and relationships between them. So you can create a project with these building blocks like human resource management or customer order management in a project, and you can import it in a new project or an existing project, for example, and start with those building blocks. So you can much quicker build a project than from scratch. So when I create a new project, even with a different framework, doesn't matter, and do this, and I select import, and for example import AdventureWorks. It will show me all the entities that are found in the project, and I can select them which ones to import, and also if I want to import the mappings and the relational model data like the tables that they are mapped to, and also it automatically imports supertypes if I select a hierarchy. If I select those and I don't want the mappings. Okay. Now I have these entities imported with their relationships and no mapping at all, because there is no relational data model. It's a new project. So even though it's AdventureWorks on SQL Server, I can now add an, for example, relational model store for Firebird and use AutoMap. And I've automatically, probably errors, yes, because some types are not supported, so I have to specify type converters, but let's say the types are supported, like the GUID, which is not supported on Firebird. So I can immediately start from scratch, import model fragments, and create databases from them. So after a while you can build a real repository of model fragments and build projects from scratch really easily. In the future we will build this out to more importers. Currently the only importer shipped with it is LLBLGen Pro Project, but we will also add model services, for example, so you can import models from the web.
All right, so how can we actually interact with the code? I'm interested in seeing how we interact with the code in a project, because this is going to output some entity objects, is what I'm assuming. How do you use those entity objects to pull data from the database and bind it to something, for example, like a report?
Oh, okay. Oh, glad you asked, Seth. I have prepared the project.
Good. That doesn't seem scripted at all, does it?
No, unexpected, yes. All right. Well, this is the form I pre-created, and it's simply a grid. I'll just dock it. And I used it to test if my database connection worked. This is using the Chinook database, which is available on Codeplex. And if we go to SQL Server, Oracle, read it. This is this database. So when I run this, I'll bind a link query result, which I'm doing here, ordered on name, to the grid that's visible. And here we are.
Interesting.
Simply data binding. Flat list, but the list bound are actually entities. So to bind is a list of artist entity objects.
So tell me about the code. I see a Chinook DB specific and a Chinook DB generic. Tell me about that.
Yes, I've prepared the adapter and self-servicing project. I didn't know which one you wanted to use, so I prepared both. We support two paradigms. First is adapter, which is two projects really. A database-specific project which uses the data access adapter, which is an adapter to connect to a database, which is specific to a database. I generated this code from SQL Server, so this is the SQL Server. So this guy knows how to persist the entities to SQL Server. It also contains the mappings for the entities. And the other one is a database generic, which is simply the entity model in classes, and it doesn't know anything about databases. So I can also add another database specific project. For example, if I have two databases in my project, let me load up the Chinook project. No, I don't want to save you. So for example, if I also have Oracle database here, and I generate the code also for Oracle, I can use the Oracle database specific here as well and use generic code, use a simple factory, for example, to create my data access adapter for the database I want to target, and then use that adapter instance to manipulate entities, read entities, and save them to the database. Self-servicing is a project, let me load it, which has a save method on entities, so it doesn't use an adapter, and all entities actually know about persistence. Some people want to use that, like for example, they want to load a collection using a collection and say load yourself. And other people say no, that's wrong. You have to separate those concerns. So we separate both. We support both. And self-servicing knows how to lazy load itself, and adapter doesn't. The reason for that is that adapter is also designed to use it in distributed scenarios, and also, for example, in large teams where the web developers are not able or not allowed to manipulate entities directly, so they have to call a service or a sublayer to persist entities and obtain them. So lazy loading is also not possible because that would circumvent those layers, because you can then call lazy loading code to fetch entities automatically. So you can pick either paradigm that you like and generate code for that and use that in your project.
All right, let's build a report. Do you know how to build reports for DevExpress?
Did it once.
I will show you. I will show you, and you'll see that the steps that you need to take are not very large. We're going to bind directly to one of your entity objects. How about we pick the artist? All we need to do is go to Chinook Reporting.
Yes.
And then right-click and do an add, new item, and then we're going to pick the report. So let's pick X report class 10.2.
This one? All right. Artist.
Let's do artist report.
All right.
All right, so here's the beauty of the reporting system, and everything you've shown us is just absolutely wonderful, because it allows us to sort of abstract away our model, and the story behind reporting that we want to give out is that really you can bind to any data that you want. So let me show you how to bind directly to the artist entity. There is a smart tag at the top left of the report.
Let me first close these guys.
All right.
This one?
Yep. Go to data source.
Right.
And now let's go to add project data source. And then we're going to do an object, right? Because we're binding to entity objects. Hit next. And it's going to ask you which one. So notice it's going to go and sort of look through everything. Looks like we want to go to the generic one. Let's go to entity classes. Let's pick artist. And let's hit finish.
All right.
All right, now, if you go to the extra reports menu item at the top, it's right next to the view, file edit view, then extra reports. All the way at the top.
Oh, here,
file
yes.
Edit view, there you go. Go to field list.
Right.
Take a look at that.
That's
Notice
it.
that our reports automatically have this sense of, hey, you have an artist entity. We know what that is. So let's go ahead and just drag on, for example, artist ID and name onto the report surface. So you just pick one, drag it on, yep. In the detail.
I thought so. Okay.
And then let's put the name over, and there you go. So let's just save this report. And now, notice that one of the interesting things is that if you were to click preview at the bottom, it's not going to know where to get the data from, right? Because that's something that the adapter takes care of.
Yeah.
So if we go back to the Windows Form project, add a button.
Here. Let me first delete the grid. Yes.
Let's just add a button to load up the report. Just any button will do, really. There you go. Let's click it.
Right. So.
And then let's click it. And then all we really need to do now is, notice we created something called an artist report.
Yeah.
So let's go to the click event on that.
Here. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's gone.
Now, all we really need to do is just say, oh, yeah, that's not going to work anymore, huh?
Let me copy paste it. I need it. Right. So.
Very good. So notice that you're getting an artist. You're ordering it by a certain thing. You have some data there. All we need to do is create a new artist report. So artist report equals new report. Even better. Look at that.
There we go.
Right. And now all we just say is report.dataSource equals toBind.toList, or toArray, or really pretty much to anything. And then we're going to say report.createDocument and then report.showPreviewDialog.
I have to give it. Okay.
That's it.
All right.
Well, let's see if it. Now, just to recap, notice that we're using your adapter to get data out. We're using your you fill all of the entities, the artist entities. We've bound a report to a couple of fields. Let's hit play and see what happens. Hopefully it works.
Well built, so something.
Let's click it. Give it a second to
Here
think
we
about
are.
life. Look at that. I mean, and that's the beauty of the reporting system, right? That we really do not care where your data comes from. So notice if you were doing the, remember you have the adapter version and then the other version?
Yes, self-servicing.
The self-servicing will automatically, the entities themselves will automatically call things as they are fetched, right? So if you wanted to add a detail band, you could do that, right?
Oh, I can do that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that with adapter as well. We just have to fetch the related data with the prefetch path in one query.
Let's do that. Let's go back to the report. Let's hit stop here, and let's add a detail band. Because I think it's, let's hit, stop. And then let's go to the report again.
Yes, I'm here.
And on the detail, on the detail, where the detail band, where it says detail on the report, if you right-click on that, right-click on that, and say insert detail report. Notice it knows that, oh wait, this entity is also related to album. So let's click that.
Okay.
And let's go back to the field list at the top left.
Yes.
The field list where it says all albums. Hit the plus on albums, and let's drag over a title.
Okay. Here?
Yep.
All right.
Now, how would you go about populating the entities so that they have the albums and the titles? I'm sorry, the artist and the titles. So show us that.
I'll define that in the link query.
Okay.
So I can say with path a prefetch, and I'll simply say albums.
All right, let's run it and see what happens.
Is this okay? Yes. Okay.
Looks like it builds. Life is good.
There it is.
Notice that again. This is probably one of the coolest things is that that I like about a reporting system, and it doesn't care where the data is from. And so you could build any kind of. Notice you could. There's another sub item like tracks. You could do another detail band if you wanted to, prefetch that graph and do all those sorts of things. I mean, but I think the point is that it's pretty easy to work with pretty much any data source, and it's pretty fast.
Yes. Yeah. And this is just 2 queries.
Yeah, it's really just 2 queries. Do you have anything else to add? Any other parting words?
Well, let me just show which queries there are ran.
Okay.
Because it's a hierarchy. So you might think for every artist it has to execute a query, but it just executes 2 queries. So when I let me first go to documentation.
So we just had a question here. How about LLBLGen supporting XPO? Is that possible?
Of course.
Of course it is. And that's something hopefully Franz and I will work on together to get out there, because it looks like, tell us why, because before you used to have your own framework, but then you didn't move away from it, but you sort of started supporting other frameworks. What was the reason for that?
Well, mainly because Entity Framework and Link to SQL are on every developer's machine in Visual Studio, and it's free. So 2.5 years ago we had to make a decision, because if we would simply compete on the framework, we would lose it, because how do you compete with a framework that's free on every developer's desktop? So we thought, well, maybe if we expand the designer with Model first and create a better designer for both those frameworks. And because we had to support more frameworks anyway, so I also added in Hibernate support, because it was just adding another framework. So now we have 4 frameworks, but because it's generic, we can add any ORM or Object Relational Mapper framework that is basically available, and support that as well.
Wonderful.
Because the mechanism is still the same. I have an abstract entity model, and I can generate table definitions, mappings, and classes. So, for example, for Hibernate, we support Fluid and Hibernate and XML files. And you can also decide, well, I just want the mapping files, because some people just like to write code and write the classes themselves, so they don't want auto-generated code. So when I go to my Chinook project here, and I say switch framework, I say Hibernate switch, it will create a backup for me, so I can always go back when I think, oh, Hibernate, man, I should never have done that, so I can go back. And now I have an Hibernate project. It complains. Okay.
Here's a question, Franz. Mark is asking, what would be the major benefits to using LLBLGen for EF4 database first development over the built-in designers? Why would you use the tool rather than the built-in designer in Visual Studio?
There are many reasons. For example, the Entity Framework Designer doesn't have update scripts for your database. So if you want to work model first, you always have to generate a full new database. That's easy in a project that's just starting, but over time it will become difficult, because you have to generate a full new database, and you cannot simply update a schema with a unique constraint like I showed. It's also canvas based, so everything is on one canvas. Like, for example, the Adventure Works project has 92 entities, and it's already a mess because it's a very big model on the screen, and it's not only slower, but it also makes navigating really hard. It doesn't have features like name, construction, definition. It doesn't have flexible template editor. You cannot import parts of the model. When you work model first, you have no control over how the tables will be named, for example. You don't have control of this. It's very, you don't have quick model. You cannot create the model quickly. You have to drag and drop the entities on the canvas. That with hundreds of entities, that's really becoming a chore over time.
Here's another question.
Yes.
It says someone's been using LLBLGen for 5+ years. This is Rudy, and he's really enjoyed it. He says sometimes the complexity of the report makes performance a problem. So, for example, say you have like a five layer deep object graph that you want to populate. Are there any tips or techniques to preview early pages of the data from the report while other parts of the report are still executing and rendering, or times for improving performance on complex queries? Is there a way to improve query time on a complex query? I know there's something called type list. Would that help? Or type views?
Yes. Yeah. Type list is a way to define a flat list over one or more entities with relationships. For example, if I want to use, if I see a customer employee and invoices, like I say, I can do this, and I say new type list. Invoice. I have now these entities in my type list, and I can specify the fields which will be in my list. For example, customer ID, company, employee, first name, last name, invoice, title. This will be a typed object which is read-only, and you can fetch it in one query, and it will simply create a join between the entities which you define here, and it will return these fields. So this can be easier when you create a a report, because reports are read-only data anyway, so and it's mostly aggregated, so you can, if you want to display a flat list of related data from different entities, you can better use a type list and define the read-only data here. So this will be one query and often more performant than fetching a whole graph of objects and then pick a couple of fields from them. Another way to do it is in the code. For example, you can add a custom projection to a link query. Now we are fetching entities, but if I can now say artist ID, for example. So this is a custom projection, and I can, for example, define joins here, join albums with it, and project the data with the artist ID into a flat list. That will be more performant than, of course, when I have to fetch a 5-layer deep graph. So when you use read-only data in a flat list, you should make a custom projection, for example, in a type list or in a link query. And when you want to use objects in a graph, you should use the objects themselves in the prefetch path.
I hope that helps, Rudy. Also, if you just want to do a preview, there is a way to get only a certain amount of data, right? Is there a way to get like a top 300 or something using your tool?
Yeah, if I stay with link, it's you can of course say take 10. So the top 10, or I can say paging. I can use take page. It's a custom page number, page 2. The size is 20. So I fetch 20 entities from the second page, and even with prefetch paths, it will work. So I can run this, and it will generate a query to first fetch the page for artists, and then we'll fetch the albums for those artists, and merge them into the same graph, and then bind them to the report.
Well, cool. I hope that helped, Rudy. I think we've gotten both sides of it going there. Another question is, how can we use DevExpress server mode with LLBLGen when working with huge data sets? That's a really good question. We have a technology, obviously, called server mode that works directly with XPO, right? And what it does is there's some very interesting. What it does is it uses link to do the pagination dynamically. I'm sure we could probably work something out to do something similar with what you've got. Is that right?
If I recall correctly, it does use the link data source. And I think it's supported because it will just use any link data source that will be that you bind to it. For example, you say it will fetch artists, and it will then generate a link query on top of artists and fetch it.
There's some other things that our guys are talking about. There's a how to create report dynamically article that I'm going to make sure I get to you, and also how to dynamically create a report based on the specified collection of objects. There's 2 articles I can send over.
Okay.
Also, one of our other guys, our XPO experts, is telling us that if you can pass in a link queryable kind of thing, it should work in server mode. But let us know if it doesn't.
Yeah, the thing I remember is that it grouped on a constant, so I had to implement the grouping on a constant in a link provider. So I know it has been used, but I don't know how it works with reports. But I think it's just the same thing. It binds to a link to an iQueryable, and whatever it it has to append to the iQueryable, like grouping and sorting and stuff. It will just append it with extension methods, like I do here in the code.
Well, cool.
Let me check if I have discussed anything.
Also, another thing to remember is that. Go ahead. Sorry, Franz.
I'm just checking my script text file.
Okay.
I haven't mentioned type views and store procedures yet.
Well, I think we'll have to say that to another time, but holy cow,
Okay.
There's tons of stuff to think about. One thing that I need to say, though, is server mode is not uniquely tied to XPO objects. There are various implementations of it, is what I'm being told. And so, so could you give us in a nutshell what was the type list and the other thing that you were going to tell us about?
The type list is defined in the designer. So it will generate an object in the code. For example, for an Hibernate, it will generate a custom class and a HQL query. And for our runtime framework, it will generate a type data table, because we're a very old framework, so we carry that over. You can also create the custom projection in code, like for example in the link query itself. You can also use our own query API to create a projection, which is at the moment a little bit lower level than link. We're working on a query spec implementation, which is a new querying system similar to link but more flexible and more close to SQL, using a fluent interface. So you will have the same query like this, but it's built with our own API, so you can extend it with your own objects, for example, for fetching. So those are the options you have for flat list fetching. You can also indeed still fetch a graph of objects, but that's where the object relational paradigm goes a bit wrong. If you just focus on objects, if you want to use flat lists like a projection of a query, you don't want to work with a graph, you want to work with a flat list and do the join on a database, because it's optimized for that. So that's why our framework supports both type lists defined in the designer and projections in custom queries. And if you want to work with object graphs, you can just fetch the graph and manipulate objects in the graph itself.
Those of you that are familiar with XPO would know this as an XP view, which is similar to what he's describing. So just to sort of bridge the gap, if you use XPO.
Yeah, LLBLGen Pro Framework has also an entity view object that can be created from an entity collection, and you can filter it in memory. And it works similar like the data view with data table combination, and so you can create different entity views on the same entity collection, which is, so the views contain objects, real entity objects, and you can filter them differently, sort them differently, for example, to work in memory with a single entity collection object. Any more questions?
Amanda, are there any more questions out there?
I think we've answered all of them, or you've answered all of them.
Well, cool, my friend. Take it away then.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Seth and Franz. Thank you for a great webinar.
My pleasure.
All right, so we have one more webinar today in about, looks like 35 minutes. Using CodeRush in MVC, Mark Miller and Roy Becker show you how to accelerate your MVC development with CodeRush. And then coming up this week, tomorrow at 10 a.m., using annotations in WinForms charts with charting evangelist Brian Wood. See how your charts can benefit from annotations, including customization of placement and layout. And then, Seth, you're back on Thursday with the reporting team at 10 a.m. for an open Q&A on the DevExpress Reporting Suite, correct?
Scary. Scary.
We get you 2 times in 1 week. We're very lucky.
Mm.
And Friday at 10 a.m., XAF UI customizations with Gary Short. Everyone has their own tastes and requirements when it comes to UI design, and in this webinar, Gary will show you how to customize the default application templates if your tastes don't quite match ours. We have a great lineup of webinars through the month of March. Visit devexpress.com/webinars and register away. And again, if you missed anything from this webinar or you want to review it later, we do post it on the DevExpress channel at tv.devexpress.com. You can look for it probably by tomorrow morning at the latest. All right, so again, thank you to Franz for being here. Thank you, Seth. And thank you all for joining us, and thanks for choosing DevExpress.